just heard Alex Jones talking about, I think, one of the key issues before us right now, and that is this declaration of NATO saying that any kind of a cyber attack that they deem to be serious, that they deem to be coming from Russia, would be the basis for starting World War III. I find that incredibly chilling. And, of course, what are we talking about? We're talking about the shooting in Orlando. We're talking about the shooting in Britain, and that is very important. Both of these are very key because of the way they're being used. And we're going to be joined by Dr. Paul Craig Roberts, who's going to be joining us in the second hour to talk about, he says he smells a rat in Orlando. And certainly there's a lot of suspicious stuff coming out of that, the background checks, and we're told that we have to surrender our freedoms, or we have to surrender the Sixth Amendment to these watch lists, right? You know, Sixth Amendment says that you're going to have, you're going to be confronted with the charges against you publicly. You're going to be able to answer them. You're going to be able to compel witnesses in your favor. You're going to be able to confront the people who are accusing you of something. You're going to do this all speedily and in public. And if you don't have the means to represent yourself, you'll be given a lawyer to help you with that process. Why did they have that? If we forget about the Star Chamber, the things that were done throughout tyrannical governments in the past that led to the creation of what happened at Runnymede, the Magna Carta, as well as our Bill of Rights, they knew what happens when you do precisely what we're doing right now. It is a hallmark of tyranny. We've seen it in our lifetime throughout the communist totalitarian blocs. We had writers like Kafka warn us about that. A bureaucracy that accuses you of something. What? You don't know. You're just going to get the punishment. You don't know why you're being punished. You don't know what you're accused of. You just know that they're doing something to you, and in their secret proceedings, they've worked it all out, and they're satisfied that they can do whatever they want to you. Now, I watch Loretta Lynch, Obama's newest Attorney General, talking about how we're not even going to give you a time limit on what we're going to do in terms of stopping people from being able to buy guns. You know, we've got the NRA desperately trying to cling to some little remnant of the Second Amendment. So pathetic to see what they're doing along with Donald Trump, saying, no, we won't let people on this mysterious list buy guns, but well, let's put a limit on it. You can look at them for 72 hours, and then they'll be able to buy guns if they're not really a terrorist. She says, no. We don't want to tie our hands that way. See, the Constitution was meant to tie your hands, Loretta Lynch. You swore an oath to the Constitution. It was meant to tie your hands. It was not meant to expedite whatever you wanted to do as government. And so it's very concerning when we look at that. It's very concerning when we look at the shooting that happened in Britain. Yes, it was a horrific thing. A young mother, young wife was murdered. Do you find any of those circumstances suspicious? I certainly do. We talked about it on Friday. We'll talk about it a little bit more here, what has happened with this. And, of course, it has turned this around precisely 1 week before the shooting, and then this happens. Remember that this is nothing new. When we look at what's happening with this cyber near declaration of war by NATO, that should really cause you to be concerned. I remember when I was a small child, I remember the Cuban Missile Crisis. I remember having the threat of a rapid nuclear war because I lived in Florida. This is all happening in Cuba. I remember as a kid in elementary school, it's like, you're going to have to bring your clothes to work because you may not be able to get home to your parents. We just lived down the block. Everybody in the 50s had the sword of Damocles hanging over their head, these nuclear weapons. And now we've got NATO putting that there again. And it's not a sword hanging by a thread over our heads. It's a nuclear war that is hanging by a thread over our heads. Understand how easy it is for the government to create a false flag cyber event that they then turn into a full-blown war. And we see these types of things being done all the time. They make these declarations like they did in the NDAA. They say, we're going to have indefinite detention by the military without due process. We're going to take you wherever we want, do whatever we want to you, hold you as long as we wish, and we're going to call that an act of, that's part of what we do during war now. Put that in the NDAA, not in the Constitution. They then come out and say, well, if we have a cyber attack that we deem secretly to be an attack, then we feel justified in starting a nuclear war. Let me talk about NATO and its false flags for just a moment here. We go back to the Cuban Missile Crisis, go back to JFK, and has now been declassified. Look it up yourself. Please do. Please educate yourself, unlike this idiot Gretchen Carlson, who we'll get to in just a moment, from Fox News, who says that the Second Amendment was written before guns were invented. Okay, that's what she tweets out. She doubles down. She wants a gun ban for whatever she thinks assault rifles are. And, of course, assault rifles, as she defines them, whatever is in her mind, they should be taken because guns were not invented when the Second Amendment was written. That's the blithering sellout idiot that is telling you. I think her program is called Real Story or something like that on Fox News. I mean, this is what Fox News gives you. You know, you can put lipstick on a pig. You can even put a mini skirt on a pig, but they're still a pig if they're that ignorant or if they're lying to you like that. Okay, come on, she can't possibly be that stupid. She's simply lying to people. But let's go back to the Cuban Missile Crisis. They desperately wanted to invade Cuba. They wanted to go to war with Cuba. We had Admiral Lemnitzer, who proposed Operation Northwoods, something very similar to 9/11. He said, let's get some passenger airliners, let's fly them into buildings, let's have terrorists blow up malls, and let's finger Cuba. Let's say that it's all Cuba's fault. That'll give us a pretense to go to war with them. President Kennedy's reaction to that was to fire him from being the chief for the Joint Chiefs of Staff. And then that was shortly before he was assassinated. Now, Lemnitzer shows up in a few years as commander of NATO forces. It wasn't a career ender for him to propose a 9/11 type false flag, Operation Northwoods, so that they could have an excuse to go to war against Cuba. You know, history rhymes, doesn't it? He goes to NATO, becomes NATO commander, and after the Second World War, they decided that they wanted to be able to equip people to fight a guerrilla war in case they were overrun by the Soviet Union. They wanted their underground to have that equipment in place right away, so they had pre-positioned a lot of stocks of weapons throughout Europe. In the 70s, we had a lot of communists who were really gaining ground in Italy, very popular. People were voting for communism. And the right and people like Admiral Lemnitzer were very concerned about that. And they came up with a process that's called Operation Gladio. With Operation Gladio, what they did was they had these people who were loyal to NATO, created terrorist attacks, attributed to them to the Red Brigade, kidnapping the Prime Minister of Italy and other things, and then blaming it on the communists. And eventually this was all unraveled because they went after the Prime Minister, Aldo Moro. And it was shown in an Italian court, but they don't talk about it here in the United States. So you can look that up as well. Please do. Please check me on that. Please check me on that. Check me on that. Check me on Operation Gladio. Check me on Operation Northwoods. And ask yourself, would our government do yet another false flag attack to try to start a war with Russia or with Cuba or to invade a country of their choice? And there's Operation Gladio on Wikipedia. It's all over the place, so you can look it up. So that's a very concerning thing. But let's go now to what they're trying to do in terms of taking our guns. Because, again, it's not Islam. It's not this guy who was a homosexual, had a lot of guilt, nothing to do with his guilt. There's no cross in Islam to put your sin. He's got to earn his way. So he has to kill these people that he can't control his urges, that he's been given this conflicted guilt about. So he does this, and we're going to talk to Paul Craig Roberts. He doesn't think that even happened. But let's go with the official story now. He shoots people, but it's not his fault. It's not Islam's fault. It's your fault if you're a gun owner. And you need to have your rights turned into privileges and perhaps curtailed. And so we've got people like Fox News' Gretchen Carlson, and she says, yes, I'm all for the assault weapon ban. And she says things on Twitter when people start to criticize her for this. She says, well, same things that our new libertarian candidates say. Well, the Second Amendment was only about deer hunting. It only protected hunting rifles, things like that. But then she gets really crazy. She says that guns were invented after the Constitution was written. I want to talk about Fox News' Gretchen Carlson now. She's made an amazing number of statements here about the Second Amendment, going back and forth with people on Twitter. And she's come out in favor of banning all assault weapons. And we're seeing this a lot from people on the right now. We're seeing everybody embrace this terror watch list, whether it is Donald Trump or Barack Obama or you name it. People on the left and the right, the NRA, coming in and embracing the terror watch list. The terror watch list, understand, destroyed the Sixth Amendment. It contradicts every aspect of the Sixth Amendment. It takes away all your protections, all the steps that they're supposed to go through that we just lump together and call it due process. I hate to just minimize it to that because people don't even think about all the steps of due process. Being able to know what the charges are against you, being able to answer them in a speedy trial in public, to question the witnesses against you, to have witnesses in your favor that you bring in, to have a defense attorney, all of those things, and then being found guilty before you are punished, not having some kind of a pre-crime punishment given to you before any of those steps happen. And yet we see people on the left and the right now all coming together. From the NRA to Fox News to Barack Obama and his so-called attorney general. And then we've got Gretchen Carlson, and she came out and says she supports the assault weapon ban. She actually put up a poll on her show, a December 2015 poll that showed a majority of people supported assault weapon ban in that particular poll. You know what, Gretchen? I don't really care. One poll does not amend the Constitution, so change it. Change it or obey it. She says, I'm with the majority today, and I'm going to take a stand. Well, you know what? You can get a poll to say anything you want to, Gretchen. And you can cherry pick the polls as much as you want. And one poll doesn't change the Constitution. We have a process for that, and you want to ignore that process. You want to ignore what the Second Amendment says, and you want to not only ignore that, but you want to ignore what the Sixth Amendment says. And we've got a lot of people who are liberals. We've got the LA Times. We've got the Intercept. We've got a lot of people talking about, wait a minute, these watch lists are really dangerous. Anybody that cares about the Constitution, that cares about individual liberty and due process, doesn't want to turn this into some kind of a kangaroo court tyrannical government. Anybody that cares about any of that stuff, that understands anything about that, is really afraid of the watch list. You should be very afraid of the watch list as well. And once they start applying punishments to that watch list, the watch list is bad enough, already has some punishments applied to it, and they're just going to keep expanding this. It'll be guns first, but that's not where it's going to stop. So she says she's with the majority of people. When they confronted her on Twitter, she said this. She said, the fact that you're even using the Second Amendment as an argument against banning assault weapons shows me you're ignorant, says Greta Carlson. Don't you know, she said, that the Second Amendment was written before guns were even invented? See, this is a woman who is either profoundly ignorant about guns, about history, about politics, about the Constitution, and about individual liberty and the principles about it. She's profoundly ignorant of all of those things to the extent this is of somebody in elementary school, or she's lying to people, thinking she can get away with this to control the narrative. She says, when she's talking to Breitbart News, she says at one point, I even asked myself, what was the use of trying to prove why assault rifles are bad to these people who think that the Second Amendment was written when they actually had guns, when they actually used them against their government, when all the muskets were state-of-the-art military weapons, okay? You know, say, oh, these are black powder rifles. Yeah. There's more people dead in cemeteries all over North America killed by black powder rifle than by anything else, folks. And they're very deadly. They shoot a big bullet, and they can kill people left and right. But she says, I don't even know why I should be arguing with these people who don't possess the most fundamental knowledge of history. I felt like I was trying to teach nuclear physics to someone who's illiterate. I would love to have a discussion with Gretchen Carlson on nuclear physics. That would really be a hoot. That would really be a hoot. I'm sure she knows a great deal about that, just like she knows a great deal about history and the Second Amendment. She said, it seemed like every single person that replied to my tweet was under the impression that they were right and I was wrong. You mean because you think that the Second Amendment was written before people had guns, before guns were invented? And you don't understand there were military weapons? Look, you need to understand. Go back and look at your history, Gretchen. As a matter of fact, when they first started instituting the first elements of gun control, and that's not counting things like the Jim Crow laws where they took them away from the blacks because they're afraid of them. But when we talked about the Supreme Court coming in with its first decision saying, oh, you can't have a sawed-off shotgun, what was their rationale? Their rationale was a sawed-off shotgun is not a military weapon. Therefore, it's not protected by the Second Amendment. You see how we flipped that around now? Now you can only have weapons that aren't military weapons. And even that was a lie. And they knew that in the 1930s. In the Civil War, you had several different cavalry units that instead of using a sword, used sawed-off shotguns in their cavalry charges. Okay, that's like I said, there's a lot of people dead from black powder and pretty primitive arms. But it was about state-of-the-art military weapons. That's what the militia was about. We were never meant to be protected by a permanent standing army. We never had a permanent standing army until after World War II. We had a permanent officer corps, but we had a militia that was there to protect us. And if it was a real justified war, and people believed that, you didn't need to draft them. You didn't need to hold a gun to their head to get them to sign up to defend their home, to defend the Constitution. And then she goes on to say, Gretchen Carlson says to Breitbart, I mean, I know the education in our country isn't the best in the world. You think? She's Exhibit A, isn't she? I'm wondering if Gretchen Carlson is the mother of Miss South Carolina. I've never seen a more empty-headed blonde in my life than Gretchen Carlson, saying that the Second Amendment was written before guns were even invented. I don't even know how to respond to somebody like that. But, of course, she thinks that you're an idiot if you know anything at all, because your knowledge doesn't match hers. So, therefore, you must be wrong because she's a highly paid Fox News anchor. So bow down and worship Gretchen Carlson and let them take away your Second Amendment, just like they've taken away your Sixth Amendment. Let's play a clip today. We had on Fox News, we had Jeff Sessions, Senator Sessions, on Fox News Sunday, and he came on to talk about the gun ban, and I want you to hear what he has to say.
And I want to ask you about some of the things that Donald Trump has done in the last week, Senator. First, his comments the day after the tragedy that seemed to imply that President Obama is somehow sympathetic to the terrorists. Here he is.
He doesn't get it, or he gets it better than anybody understands. It's one or the other, and either one is unacceptable. We're led by a man that either is not tough, not smart, or he's got something else in mind.
Question, do you know what that something else Trump refers to that he thinks that President Obama has in mind?
No, I don't. I don't know what he's referring to there, but I do believe he is correct to raise the question that the policies of this administration, from going back to 2011 when we withdrew all our troops from Iraq and allowed ISIS to form and become an entity, probably would never have happened otherwise.
I just want to go through what Trump said. He said either he doesn't get it or he gets it better than anyone understands. He's got something else in mind. I mean, that certainly seems to imply that somehow he is sympathetic to radical Islam.
No, I don't think he means that, but I think he's criticizing him, President Obama, for going too far. To not understanding the threat. The president and Hillary Clinton now says she wants to go from 10,000 Syrian refugees to 65,000 Syrian refugees. When Mr. Brennan, CIA director, says we can't do vetting.
Yeah, we're going to talk about that when we come back. You know what? It is not an issue of gun control. This is an issue of border patrol.
My fellow InfoWarriors, I am very excited to be able to announce to you the introduction at InfoWarsLife.com of a new way to save time and money when you stock up on InfoWars Life formulations like Survival Shield X2 and Super Male Vitality. Just go to InfoWarsLife.com today, select your favorite product, click on Auto Ship before adding to cart, and choose how often you want us to send you another order. Every time you choose Auto Ship at InfoWarsLife.com, you get 10% off and you won't have to worry about running out and having to reorder next time. And of course, you can cancel with one click anytime. As you know, I'm all about the idea of a 360 win, and the new auto ship feature at InfoWarsLife.com is a sure win for everybody. A win for liberty, a win for health, and a win when it comes to big savings. Visit InfoWarsLife.com today and save 10% on your next InfoWars Life order by selecting auto ship at checkout. That's InfoWarsLife.com or call 888-253-3139.